Good morning, friends. So let us begin the class. All right. So I would also like to share the course syllabus with you, and then we will move into today's topic. Okay, so I hope you can see the screen now. So our course is Introduction to New Testament. I'll be sharing the syllabus. You can go through it. But just I would like to quickly take you through the course outline and the assessment here. Okay, course outline, it's but actually divided into 14 days, okay, or distributed to 14 days. And we will also have our final examination. So totally it's a 15-day course. All right. So the course will go as follows. First, we will go through some of the backgrounds. Okay, as you can see in days 1, 2, and 3. Political background, socio-cultural and religious background. So this is what we will be doing first. And then we will move into the canonicity and chronology of the New Testament books. And day 5 will be New Testament interpretation. Okay. And after that, we will get into the New Testament books as such, and we will begin with the synoptic gospels and move down through the New Testament down to the book of Revelation. All right. So the aim of the course would be to introduce you to the New Testament books and the background of the New Testament. Okay, so that you can appropriately approach the New Testament and interpret it. Okay. All right. So assessment, take a quick look at this. Regular attendance, that is necessary, and attendance will be marked for every session. Okay, 2 or 3 sessions we will do every day, and attendance will be marked for that. All right. And class part is compulsory. All right, class participation is not just attendance, but answering to questions and doing some other works which I ask you to do. And then formative assignments, it is nothing but short assignments. Okay, so every day some work will be given for you, so you will have to do them and come to the class prepared or submit them according to the instruction. Okay, so that carries good amount of marks for your final grading. All right, and final examination will also be there. Okay, so these are the major things for your assessment. With respect to the attendance, okay, if at all we do not have live class due to some internet issues and I make video and give for you, I will mark the attendance based on your response to the video. Okay, so I will be giving you some work, a follow-up work along with the video. Only if you finish that work in the given time, your attendance will be marked. Okay, so please keep note of that also. All right, so this is about the course syllabus. All right, so let's begin the political background of New Testament. So we will begin it today, will not end it today. All right, so we will begin it today. Fine. Background of New Testament. First of all, let's think about why political background is necessary for New Testament? Okay, when we ask this question, why this political background is necessary for New Testament, it is simply because all the books of the New Testament were written with some political background and in some political context. Okay, as we go through the political background, you will understand what I am stating now much better. When it comes to the history of Israel, I hope you know something about the history of Israel. Okay, surely if you have done BTH, you would have had a course on history of Israel, so you might know about the history of Israel. And even if you have not done your BTH and you have directly come from a secular background, just from the reading of the Bible itself, okay, you may be aware of the general overview, okay, of the history of Israel. So anyhow, before getting into what I have for today in the political background, let me give you a brief overview of the history of Israel. So when does the history of Israel begin? If you look into the Bible, the history of Israel begins with God's call to Abraham, which occurs in Genesis chapter 12. Okay, Genesis chapter 1 to 11, you read about the creation story, flood story, the Tower of Babel, and so on. But when we come to Genesis chapter 12, verse 1, God calls Abraham. That is where the history of Israel begins. Why do we say that? It is because Abraham is the forefather of the nation of Israel. God calls Abraham and promises to Abraham that he will make him a great nation, and he promised to give him the land of Canaan. Okay, these are the two major things that you see in Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 to 3. Okay, promise of land, that is land of Canaan, and promise of offspring, that is a great nation. All right, and as we see later, God blesses Abraham with Isaac, and from Isaac comes Jacob, and from Jacob comes the 12 tribes of Israel. And that's how the book of Genesis ends, with the 12 tribes of Israel. These 12 tribes of Israel later constituted the nation of Israel after Moses delivered them from the Egyptian bondage. Okay, so that is why we say that the history of Israel begins with Abraham. All right, so beginning with Abraham, that is Genesis chapter 12, whatever you read in the rest of the Old Testament is part and parcel of the history of Israel. All right, anyhow, let me just give to you the key moments in the history of Israel. Okay, so these 12 tribes of Israel, they went down to Egypt and they became slaves in Egypt. And that is what we read in the book of Exodus. Moses liberates them from Israel, the Egyptian bondage. And later under Joshua, they enter the promised land, Canaan, and they become established as a nation. All right, the nation of Israel is established there. And God makes a covenant with the people of Israel, and all those things we see from Exodus to Deuteronomy. All right, so that's how the nation of Israel become a nation and get settled in their land, Canaan. All right, but later what we read about the history of Israel is they become disobedient to God, because of which several things happen. One major thing is the nation of Israel gets divided into two kingdoms called the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. Okay, just recollect how many tribes in Israel. 12 tribes were there in Israel. And then Saul was the first king of Israel, followed up by David. And after David comes Solomon. These three kings, Saul, David, and Solomon, they ruled over the entire nation of Israel. That is over all the 12 tribes. But after Solomon, there is a break or a division in the 12 tribes, or a division in the nation of Israel. The nation of Israel gets divided into northern kingdom, which consisted of 10 tribes, and southern kingdom, which consisted of 2 tribes. Okay, this northern kingdom is also called as Israel, and the southern kingdom is called as Judah. Okay, you need to be clear with these things. Okay, these are very, very important, not just for the Old Testament, but also for New Testament. Okay, so the northern kingdom called Israel consisted of 10 tribes, and the southern kingdom called Judah consisted of 2 tribes. Right after the reign of Solomon, this division happened. And from that time onwards, that is from the time of the division, that was somewhere around 930 BC. Okay, from that time of the division until the end of the book, until the end of the Old Testament, that is the book of Malachi, what we see is this divided kingdom. What we see is this divided kingdom. They were never united back as 12 tribes of Israel, as one nation of Israel. They were divided, all right, into northern and southern kingdoms. And the northern kingdom was took into captivity by Assyria in 722 BC. So the Assyrians captured the northern kingdom Israel and took them as captives in 722 BC. And later the Babylonians captured the southern kingdom Judah and took them as captives in 588 or 587 BC. Okay, these are very important dates in the history of Israel. 722 BC, Assyrian captivity, and 587, 586 BC, Babylonian captivity. Okay, all these things you can read in the Bible itself. Okay, like the book of Kings. If you go through the book of Kings, first Kings and second Kings, you can read about the division of Israel and later about the Assyrian captivity and the Babylonian captivity as well. All right, so this is where we enter into our slides for today. That is, we begin with the Babylonian period. Okay, the Assyrian captivity, we don't mind it so much. Okay, that's also important, but we don't mind it so much here because that turned out to be a different history. Whereas this Babylonian period and the Babylonian captivity and the following periods are very much relevant to the study of the New Testament. So we directly begin with the Babylonian captivity or the Babylonian period. Okay, so the Babylonian period, as it's mentioned there, 587 to 537 BC. Okay, I'll just read the points and explain to you. You can follow me as I do that. Okay, the Babylonians conquered the capital city of Jerusalem in 587, destroyed the temple, and took the Israelites into exile. Very, very important event in the history of Israel. The city of Jerusalem was captured. The Jerusalem temple was destroyed by the Babylonians under the king Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, we know about Nebuchadnezzar. We read about him in the book of Daniel. So under his rulership, the Babylonians captured Jerusalem and destroyed Jerusalem temple. So with the captivity, second point, came the end of Jewish independence. Until then, they were independent to some extent, all right? They were in their own land. They were governed by their kings. But with the captivity, the independence was lost. They came under the rulership of the Babylonians. And many things took a drastic turn. Okay, what are the things that took a drastic turn? The theology of the Jews changed and their outlook on life changed. Okay, we will not go into much detail about that, but you can know that the theology of the Jews, that is the way they understood God, the way they understood themselves, the way they understood life, all these things changed. People were exposed from monotheism to polytheism in the new land with new culture and people. Okay, monotheism is belief in one God. Polytheism is belief in many gods. All right. So these Jewish people, they believed in one God, right? That is the God Yahweh. They were monotheists, but now in Babylon, they were introduced or exposed to polytheism, and they lived among polytheistic people, that is, people who served many gods. Third point, captivity brought the end of the Jewish state, as I told. However, it did not end Judaism. In fact, it gave birth to the practice of Orthodox Judaism. What do we mean by that? The meaning is the independence, Jewish independence was lost, but Jewish religion was not lost. Okay, the Jews before their captivity, they worshipped Yahweh, and their religion is called as Yahwism by scholars. Scholars call it as Yahwism. What happened after the captivity was Orthodox Judaism came into emergence. Okay, so the religion was not destroyed, but the religion took a different shape. The religion took a different shape, and that shape is nothing but Orthodox Judaism, or simply Judaism. Fourth point, religious developments happened amid struggles in foreign land. Okay, what happened? Fifth point, the period witnessed the rise of synagogue worship among the Jews. Okay, you don't see anywhere in the Old Testament people worshipped in synagogues. Okay, do you see? No. All right, people in the wilderness worshipped in the tabernacle. Later, during the period of monarchy, people worshipped in the temple. But we don't see or read about synagogue worship in the Old Testament itself. Why? Because this synagogue worship was a later development in the history of Israel, and it developed mainly during this period of captivity. Okay, so these are religious developments that are happening in the history of Israel. Okay, synagogue worship and strict observance or obedience to Torah, that is the law. Replacement of temple priests with scribes or teachers to teach the law in the synagogues. Okay, in the Old Testament period, we see temple priests like Aaron and the Levites, Aaronites, Levites. All right, but later, because the temple was destroyed, there was the emergence of scribes or teachers of the law, and study of the law replaced temple sacrifices. No temple, so no temple priests, no temple, so no temple sacrifices. Therefore, there were changes in the religious setup of Jews. So all these things started to emerge during the Babylonian period. All right, Judaism itself, and it took different shape as we proceed through the next periods. All right, the last point, the fall of the Babylonians occurred in 538 BC, and with it the Persians came to power. Okay, so Babylonians under Nebuchadnezzar took the Jewish people into captivity 587, and 537. In that period, the Persians overpowered Babylon, and the Persian Empire came into existence. So we move on to the Persian period from 537 to 332 BC. First point, the Persian king Cyrus revised the policies of the Babylonians and allowed all its subjects to practice their own culture and religion. During the period of Babylon, the Babylonian kings emphasized that their subjects, that is, the people who were under them, like the Israelites, they should worship the Babylonian king. Okay, just recollect what happens in the book of Daniel. The kings make statues of themselves and ask the Jewish people, Israelites, to worship the statues. All right, so that was the Babylonian policy. But when King Cyrus came to power, the Persian king, he changed those policies and allowed all its subjects to practice their own culture and own religion. They were free to practice their own religion. And so what happened? Cyrus, he allowed the Israelites to go to their land and rebuild their temple. This was part of the policy of Cyrus. He allowed them to practice their own religion, and he allowed them to go to their land and rebuild their temple. Third point, With the freedom to return to their land, 3 different returns took place under the leadership of people like Joshua, the high priest, Zerubbabel, the government official, Ezra, the law teacher, and Nehemiah, the king's cupbearer. Okay, so under all these leaders, the Jewish people returned in different periods of time. Okay, first there is a return under Joshua and Zerubbabel. They lead a group of people. Later, Ezra leads a group of people. And even later, Nehemiah leads a group of people from Babylon back to the land of Israel, or now we should say to the land of Judah. Okay, to be precise, to the land of Judah. 4th point, Cyrus returned all the stolen goods of the Jerusalem temple stolen by King Nebuchadnezzar. King Nebuchadnezzar takes away all the goods of the temple, and all those things Cyrus returned. And what else Cyrus did? Next point, he decentralized the government and gave relaxation to the captives. The Israelites were ruled by high priests with minimal interference from the Persian kings. Okay, so this is called as decentralization. That is, just they were under the Persian Empire, but they were not directly ruled by the Persian kings. Okay, they were ruled by their own people. That is the high priests. They were ruled by their high priests, but under the Persian control. Okay, so that is called as decentralization of government. So all these changes happened during the Persian period. The next point, it was during this period that the synagogues emerged as significant place for teaching and worship. Okay, as I told, it started to emerge during the Babylonian period and it took shape in the following periods. And as we see it here, it became a significant place for teaching and worship. All right, and Torah obedience became the center of Jewish belief, and they became increasingly more faithful towards it. Torah, that is the law of Moses, became the center of Jewish life and piety. The next point, the Jews rebuilt the temple and dedicated it in 516 or 515 BC, and this is called the Second Temple. Another very important date and very important event in the history of Israel. Okay, the Persian king asked them, allowed them to go back to their land to rebuild their temple, and the Jews rebuilt their temple, which was destroyed previously by Nebuchadnezzar. They rebuilt the temple and dedicated it in 516 or 515 BC, and this is called Second Temple. Please remember that term. Okay, some more about the Persian period. 5 important kings ruled during this period, and you can see the names of these 5: Cyrus, Cambyses, Darius, Xerxes, Artaxerxes. All right, you can take a look at their periods also. No need to memorize, but just you can have a knowledge about them. All right, the final point, the conquest of the Greek king Alexander the Great brought the downfall of the Persian kingdom and the beginning of Greek rule over the Israelites. Okay, now the Persian kingdom was conquered by Alexander the Great, and that brought the beginning of the Greek rule over the Israelites. All right, so to that we turn now. Greek or Hellenistic period, 332 to 167 BC. Okay, first point, with the conquest of Alexander the Great over the Persians, the Jews were brought under the control of the Greeks. Okay, that's what I just mentioned now. Second point, thus 332 BC onwards, the Jews were exposed to the Greek culture. Okay, just trace the history. Captured first by Babylonians, and from Babylonians, Persians took over, that is Persians conquered, and the Israelite people came under the Persian rule. And now Greek rule comes over, and the Jewish people or the Israelites, they come under the Greek ruling. Okay, and now when they came under Greek rule, they got exposed to the Greek culture, which is also called as Hellenistic culture. That's why we call it as Greek or Hellenistic period. Third point, Alexander's vision was to bring the whole world mastered by the essentially Greek culture. Okay, that is called as Hellenism. Alexander the Great, King Alexander, he wanted to Hellenize the whole world. that is to make the whole world, that is first of all to capture the whole world and to make the whole world Greek in culture and even in religion to some extent, okay, in culture especially. And what he did, fourth point, he promoted Greek culture or Hellenism throughout his conquest, which is called Hellenization. Okay, these terms you can keep in your mind. Okay, Hellenism, Hellenization. Hellenization was the process by which the world was Hellenized, or in other words, the world was saturated with the Greek culture. Okay, the next point, the term Hellenism basically means Greek way of life or Greek culture. All right. So what happened during this period of Hellenization? The next point says the widespread of Greek culture occurred through the policies of Alexander the Great, such as, how did he do that? He did it in this way: one currency, one language, rise of education and philosophies, establishment of Greek cities, and spread of Greek deities. This was the way Alexander achieved Hellenization. He conquered the known world of that time, okay, much of the world of that time, and he brought one currency among all the people, among all the nations that he conquered, and one language, that is Koine Greek, became the language of the people. Rise of education and philosophies, that also impacted the people to follow the Greek culture. An establishment of Greek cities. Polis simply means city. Okay, establishment of Greek cities. Here and there he established Greek cities. Okay, and that became a major influence of Greek culture, for Greek culture. All right, spread of Greek deities, that is Greek gods. So in all these ways, Alexander tried to Hellenize the world. In other words, spread Greek culture. However, Alexander did not live long after coming to power. He came to power in 332, but he died in 323 BC, just 9 to 10 years. But then he conquered so many nations and he spread the Greek culture. All right. Anyhow, Alexander died in 323 BC. His kingdom was divided into 3 smaller kingdoms. What are those? Macedonia, Asia, and Egypt, each ruled by one of his generals. Okay. The next point, Palestine. Okay, that's our focus here. So we will look into Palestine. Palestine came first to be part of Egypt. Okay, the previous point says, right, 3 smaller kingdoms, Macedonia, Asia, and Egypt. Palestine first came to be part of Egypt, ruled by Ptolemy from 320 to 198 BC. Later it came under the Seleucids. Okay, Ptolemies and Seleucids. Okay, you can remember these terms also. Okay, Ptolemies and Seleucids were the major generals or the major kingdoms that followed Alexander the Great. Okay, Alexander the Great, after his death, the 3 smaller kingdoms, one kingdom was ruled by Ptolemies and another kingdom was ruled by Seleucids. All right. So initially Palestine was under the Ptolemies and later it came under Seleucid power from 198 to 167 BC. Okay, that's the second point. Third point, one of the Seleucid rulers, okay, very important for our study, Antiochus Epiphanes. He sought to destroy the Jewish religion by inflicting horrible atrocities on anyone who practiced or professed the Jewish faith. This Antiochus Epiphanes, he was very much against the Jewish people, the Jewish religion. Due to some reason or reasons, he hated the Jewish religion and he wanted the Jewish people to practice the Greek way of life. Okay, just remember, I was telling you that Alexander the Great Hellenized the world. That is, he spread the Greek culture across the world. But still, the Jewish people, to a great extent, were not Hellenized. That is, they were not following the Greek way of life, but they just continued to follow the Jewish way of life prescribed in the law of Moses. But when Antiochus Epiphanes came to power, he wanted the Jews also to practice the Greek way of life, and he hated the Jewish way of life. So what he did, he sought to destroy the Jewish religion by different means. Okay, we will see one or two of his major things, what he did. All right, so he sought to destroy the Jewish way of life. The last point, some Jewish patriots revolted against Antiochus Epiphanes for political freedom. Okay, and that period came to be known as the Hasmonean period, and the revolt is popularly called the Maccabean revolt. Okay, we will look into it in some more detail in the next period. All right, so until now, what have we seen? We have seen the Babylonian period, when the Jewish people were captured by Nebuchadnezzar. The Jerusalem temple was destroyed, and the Jewish people were taken to Babylon. Followed by the Persian period. The Persian period, when King Cyrus came to power and released the Jewish people to go back to their land and build their temple. They built the temple and dedicated it, which is called the Second Temple. And following the Persian period comes the Hellenistic period, or the Greek period, where Alexander the Great conquered the world and the Jewish people came under the Greek rule. All right, and after the death of Alexander, kingdom gets divided into 3 smaller kingdoms, and for our study we look into Ptolemies and Seleucids. Okay, because Palestine first came under Ptolemies and later under Seleucids, and one such Seleucid ruler was Antiochus Epiphanes, who was against the Jewish people. All right, now we move on to the Hasmonean period, which is from 167 to 63 BC. The first point, with the exposure to Greek culture and the atrocities posed by Antiochus Epiphanes, there was infiltration of Greek way of life in the Jewish people, which later resulted as Hellenistic Jewish life. Jerusalem was made into a Greek city. Okay, let me pause here for a moment and explain to you the importance of what is happening during this period of Antiochus Epiphanes. As I just mentioned a while ago, he wanted to destroy the Jewish way of life and force the Jewish people to follow the Greek way of life. So he did so many things. Okay, so he built a gymnasium, which is the very important thing. And he bribed some of the Jewish officials, the priests, the high priests, and made them to do what he wanted. Okay, these things he was doing. And when he spread the Greek way of life among the Jewish people in Jerusalem, many people got attracted to the Jewish way of life. Especially many young people got attracted to the Jewish way of life, and they wanted to follow that. They thought that they were attracted by the Greek way of life. They wanted to follow that. They thought the Jewish way of life is old, is not so modern. No need to follow that. Greek way of life is very attractive, and many people follow that. So many youths wanted to follow the Greek way of life, and thus Antiochus Epiphanes was successful to some extent in Hellenizing the Jews, and Jerusalem was also made as a Greek city, especially by the establishment of gymnasium. Okay, if you want more information about that, you can just Google and read about that. Okay, fine. The second point, many Jews abandoned their monotheistic lifestyle and adopted new way of life, which is Hellenistic. All right, that's what I just mentioned now. And third point, in the midst of disturbances, there were a group of Jewish loyalists. There was a group, okay, not where, there was a group of Jewish loyalists who banded together to preserve Judaism. Okay, and they were called the pious ones, or Hasidim. Okay, Hasidim is a Hebrew word. That's meaning is pious ones. So this group of people, they joined together or banded together to preserve Judaism. Many Jews are falling for the Greek way of life. So what shall we do? We need to do something to preserve the Jewish way of life. So these pious ones who all had the same vision, they came together and they formed a group. On the other side, what Antiochus Epiphanes was doing, a very, very important thing that he did was he forced the Jews to make sacrifices to Zeus. Okay, please know that Jews worship only one God, and that is Yahweh. They don't worship any other gods. Even during the Babylonian period, you see how Daniel and his friends, they stood for their religion, their faith, that they will not worship Nebuchadnezzar or any other gods, but they will only worship Yahweh. But here what happens, Antiochus Epiphanes forces the Jews to make sacrifices to Zeus, which is a Greek god. And not just that, he also made offerings of pigs on the altar of the Jerusalem temple. Okay, we need to know what is the depth of his act. Pigs were considered as unholy by the Jews. Okay, you know that in the Jewish law, in the Mosaic law, they were even commanded not to eat pigs. Okay, that was one of the unholy animals for the Jews. But what Antiochus Epiphanes does here is he offered sacrifice of the pig on the altar of the Jerusalem temple, which is a great abomination for the Jews. Okay, that is called as the abomination of desolation. You can read about it in the book of Daniel and also in the Gospels. Okay, abomination of desolation. That great abomination Antiochus Epiphanes did. And what happened then? Next point, once a Jewish outlaw, that is the person who broke faith from the Jewish tradition, a Jewish outlaw came forward to sacrifice a pig on the altar, and a man named Mattathias killed him and destroyed the altar. This is a very important turning point. Okay, a Jewish man himself, an outlaw, he came and tried to sacrifice a pig on the Jewish altar, Jerusalem temple altar. And at that time, a man named Mattathias, an old man, he was very angry with what is happening because that is defiling God's temple. So he went, killed that man, and destroyed the altar of the temple. And the next point, his act gave birth to a widespread rebellion, and thus Maccabean revolt began. Okay, just as I mentioned a while ago, there was already a group called the Pious Ones who wanted to do something, and now Mattathias, this old man, steps forward to kill an outlaw and destroy the altar. And all these people, Mattathias and the Pious Ones, Mattathias' sons, all joined together and rebel against Antiochus Epiphanes, and that is called as the Maccabean revolt. All right. So as I said, Mattathias was an old man. So even though he began this revolt, he did not live for a long time after that. He died in few years. Okay, but before his death, he appointed his son Judas to lead the revolt. Okay, there were 5 sons for Mattathias, and he appointed Judas Maccabeus to lead the revolt. The next point, Judas, whose nickname was Maccabees. Okay, Maccabees meaning hammer. He led a revolt against Antiochus Epiphanes and won independence. All right, he led a revolt, this revolt, a Maccabean revolt, and won independence for the Jewish people. Third point, the defiled temple was purified and rededicated in 164 BC. This event is commemorated as the festival of Hanukkah, which means feast of dedication. Okay, another important date and event in the history of Israel. Okay, after gaining independence from Antiochus Epiphanes, the temple which was defiled, it was completely purified and rededicated, and that is called as, and the rededication festival is called as the festival of Hanukkah. Okay, we read about this in the New Testament, John's Gospel also. Okay, the Maccabees established a Jewish state ruled by the Hasmonean dynasty. Hasmonean is the official family name for the leaders of the Maccabees. Okay, so they gained independence from Antiochus Epiphanes, that is from the Seleucid rule, and they established their own rule, the Hasmonean dynasty. Okay, and who constituted the Hasmonean dynasty? It is nothing but the family of the Maccabees, the Maccabean family. That is the sons of Mattathias, beginning with Judas and his brothers, and then their descendants. Okay, that is the Hasmonean dynasty. They began to rule the Jewish people. Okay, so we are tracing the history now. Babylon's ruled Jews, then Persians ruled Jews, then Greeks ruled Jews, then the divided kingdoms, Ptolemies, and later Seleucids ruled Jews, and now the Hasmoneans, that is the Jewish people themselves, get the rule over the Jewish state, and that began in 167 and went down till 63 BC. And another two points in this slide. During this period, Jewish sects like Pharisees and Sadducees emerged. Okay, we don't read about them in the Old Testament, right? So these people, these sects, they emerged during this period. The last point, due to internal issues in the dynasty, it came to an end in 63 BC, and the Romans took control of Palestine, which is nothing but the Jewish people came under the Roman control. The last slide for today, and we will continue it tomorrow. That is the Roman period, 63 BC to 70 AD. First point, the Roman rule, which began in 63 BC, lasted for the next 4 to 5 centuries. But we consider the period till 70 AD for our study. Okay, only we consider till 70 AD because that is our focus. Okay, for the introduction to New Testament. Okay, so what happens with the rise of the Roman Empire? The Roman general Pompey annexed the territory of Palestine without much struggle in 63 BC. Okay, from 167 to 63, Hasmoneans were ruling. But when the Romans came to power, rising in power, they annexed, that is, they captured the territory of Palestine in 63 BC. Very easily they captured it. The next point, Palestine remained under Roman rule to the end of the Second Temple period and beyond. Okay, Second Temple period and beyond. The last point, the period from the time of dedication of the new temple in 515 BC to its destruction by the Romans in AD 70. This is called the Second Temple Judaism. Another term that you need to keep in mind. Okay, already I told Second Temple. What is Second Temple? That is the temple that was built and dedicated in 516, 515 BC. And what is Second Temple Judaism? That is the period, or Second Temple period is the period from 515 BC to 70 AD. Okay, 70 AD, the Jerusalem temple was destroyed again. So that marks the end of our study of the political empires. Okay, 515 BC to AD 70 is the Second Temple period, and the religion of that time is called Second Temple Judaism. All right, so that's all for today. Okay, so please watch the video and mark the important events that happened in the different periods as part of your class notes, which I said I will check later. Okay, thank you.